here in Massachusetts, gay marriage is legal. And one of the issues that came up once gay marriage was legalized, first by the Supreme Judicial Court, and secondly by the legislature, was the issue of Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you know the story, of course, the story is that Sodom and Gomorrah became very sinful, and the word is wicked, cities, and therefore God destroyed them so that the wickedness would not grow and spread. But when you really look at the account, you understand that the real reason why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, as he explains to Abraham, is not so much because they were wicked, it's because there were no righteous people, no good people in the city. And we look at that in light of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, you are the light of the world, you are the salt of the earth. So you and I are called to be people who live the faith in such a way that we become lights and salt to others. That means, number one of our first priorities is not to be going around telling other people how to run their lives. It's we have to be focused on doing the will of God. And when we're focused on doing the will of God, then we become those who are the lights and salt of the earth. If we were to turn around and say we're in danger of being destroyed, then what we're also turning around is saying there's no righteous people here. Yet you and I are called to be the righteous. However, we also make a mistake if we turn around and we focus on, we'll say, the sexual morality, which is often connected to the concept of Sodom and Gomorrah, and miss the point of other forms of immorality that God also says you have to repent of this. And you'll find that, for example, in the book of Amos, where there's economic immorality and economic injustice. So, for example, in the book of Amos, you see that Amos, speaking for God, is telling the people that you have been focused on luxury and you've turned your heart against the poor. And he gives the example, there's several examples, but one of them is that people are living on ivory beds. Now, an ivory bed is actually not a bed made out of ivory. It's a wooden bed that has ivory inlay. If you are in the Boston area or ever in the Boston area, you can see one at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. So it's a wooden bed with ivory inlay. He says you're living on these ivory beds, very expensive items, while people have nothing. And so when we look at that, in light of what God is calling us to do, he's also calling us to be people of all forms of justice and equity. And therefore, he's calling us to be focused on being people who are, like in Sodom and Gomorrah, being people who are righteous. And one of the things that happened was there were a lot of talk show hosts that lobbied for an end to this immigration reform. And many of them speaking as people who are Christians of one form or another and saying, yes, I'm Christian and I'm speaking as a person who wants to bring an end to immigration reform. Benedict XVI at the Aparecida conference of Salem this past, past April, I think, turned around and he said that the overriding issue that's affecting Latin America is poverty. And that's the reality. If you could fix the poverty issues in Latin America, you'd fix immigration. It's that simple. For example, you have this guy calling for people to reject the Latinos because they're illegals and making fun of Latinos and Mexicans and everything else in the interest of this illegal immigration. And then at the same time boasting about the fact that he has an electrically heated toilet seat, and he had someone waiting for him in line to buy an Apple iPhone. Now, with all due respect to Apple, and we use Apple equipment here, an Apple iPhone costs $500. And the average salary that the average Latino American receives, or Latino, it receives in the Americas is $500 a year. So we go back to that whole concept of the economic injustice in Amos, and we go back to these people who say, yes, I am Christian, but I'm going to turn a hard heart to the poverty in Latin America while I buy myself a $500 device. And that's exactly what Amos is speaking out against. You're doing all these, seeking after all these luxuries and turning your heart on the poor. And that's the focus that God is calling in an economic morality that is just as serious in God's mind as what you can say about Sodom and Gomorrah. And the response is the same. Be the salt of the earth, be the light of the world. Therefore, you can't turn around and be focused on turning around and seeking luxuries and then at the same time turning your heart on the poor. God makes it very clear that is not what we are all about. In today's gospel, we see the story of the apostles who are talking to Jesus after they've all been rejected by these Samaritan towns. And the Samaritan towns don't want them there because they're on their way to Jerusalem. They're going to be with the Jews. And they're Jewish. And the Samaritan towns want nothing to do with them. And so James and John say, Lord, shall we call down fire upon these towns? And Jesus says, no. That's not what I'm about. That's not what the Father is all about. And so it is, again, we look at that. What is it that we're called to be? Not to turn around and call fire on others, but we ourselves are called to be light of the world and salt of the earth. Therefore, he's calling us, as he called James and John, to deepen their faith. And he's calling us to be people of faith, that we may live our faith in a way that proclaims the gospel. That's our call. We can't do that if we see nothing wrong with economic injustice. So it is with us. We can turn around and we can say, yes, I'm going to live my faith. I'm going to go to church every Sunday and then sit on an electrically heated toilet seat. Or we can turn around and say, what is it that God is calling me to do with my material goods in such a way that I am enhancing those around me instead of just serving myself? And that's the issue that we see in Amos that we're called to as people of faith. So we can be focused on Sodom and Gomorrah, and the message of Sodom and Gomorrah is you and I are called to be righteous, which means we're called to live our faith, be salts of the earth, light to the world. But if we're also missing the point, if we focus on Sodom and Gomorrah and we don't focus on what Amos teaches, which is that you and I are also called to be righteous and just in everything we do, whether it be in a moral sphere or an economic sphere. God bless you.